It was the kind of afternoon where everything felt calm, predictable, and ordinary. Walking along one of the winding paths was Emily Harper. She moved steadily, her cane tapping lightly in front of her to find her way. Her beige coat fit snugly, a comforting layer against the cool breeze. At her side was Max, her guide dog, a sleek and powerful German shepherd with a coat that shone in the pale sunlight. Emily's hand rested lightly on his harness, her grip firm but gentle. To most of the people who passed by, Emily seemed like a fragile figure. Her careful steps and the cane she carried made it clear she couldn't see. Some people glanced her way with polite sympathy, others with a sense of quiet admiration. After all, it wasn't easy for someone blind to navigate the busy, noisy world. But Emily moved with purpose, as if she belonged in the crowd just like anyone else. If anyone had taken the time to watch more closely, though, they might have noticed something unusual. Max was no ordinary guide dog. His movements were different, sharp, controlled, and deliberate. Most guide dogs walked calmly, but Max walked like he was ready for action. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes darting back and forth, always alert. Every step he took seemed to have meaning, as if he were following an invisible map that only he could see. Emily, too, wasn't as simple as she seemed. Sure, she couldn't see the world around her. She couldn't watch the leaves fall from the trees or see the bright colors of the flowers lining the park's paths. But Emily didn't need her eyes to know where she was going. There was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself, a fire in her unseeing eyes that hinted at a story far bigger than anyone could guess. She wasn't just some blind woman with a dog, there was something more, something deeper. But for now, that fire stayed hidden. As they walked, Max led Emily with steady confidence, his powerful body moving in sync with her steps. She trusted him completely. He was more than just a guide, he was her partner, her protector, her eyes in a world she couldn't see. Max's loyalty was unshakable, and Emily knew that as long as he was by her side, she could handle whatever the world threw at her. The park was full of life, but Emily and Max moved as if they were in their own bubble. They didn't draw much attention. People were too busy with their own lives to notice them for more than a moment. A jogger passed by with headphones in, nodding politely as he swerved around them. A young couple walked hand in hand, laughing about something only they understood. A little girl chased a butterfly across the grass, her giggles carrying on the wind. For Emily and Max, it was just another day in the park. Or so it seemed. The truth was, Emily had learned long ago that peace and quiet could be deceiving. She had faced enough challenges in her life to know that trouble often came when you least expected it. And Max had been trained to sense danger before it even arrived. He was more than just a guide dog. He had a past, one that most people would never imagine. But Emily never talked about that, and Max never showed it. To everyone else, he was just a very good dog. As they walked, Emily enjoyed the sounds of the park. She didn't need to see the children playing or the leaves falling to feel the beauty of the day. The rustle of the trees, the laughter of strangers, the distant bark of a dog, all of it painted a picture in her mind that was just as vivid as any photograph. She smiled softly, her hand brushing Max's head. "It's a nice day, isn't it, Max?" she said. Max didn't respond, of course, but his tail wagged slightly, and Emily could feel his energy shift. He agreed. But as they rounded a bend in the path, Max's ears pricked up. His body tensed slightly, and Emily could feel it through the harness. She stopped, tilting her head as if to listen more closely. "What is it, boy?" she asked softly. Max didn't bark or growl, but his posture changed. He stood taller, his muscles coiled like a spring. Emily trusted Max's instincts more than her own. If he thought something was wrong, there was a good chance he was right. But she couldn't hear or sense anything unusual. The park still sounded the same: children playing, people chatting, the wind in the trees. Whatever had caught Max's attention wasn't obvious, at least not yet. "Come on, Max," Emily said, her voice steady but calm. "Let's keep going." She trusted Max to lead her, to protect her if anything went wrong. He always did. But as they continued down the path, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Max knew something she didn't. His movements were sharper now, his head turning more often to scan their surroundings. It wasn't like him to act this way without a reason. And he had a reason. Because today wasn't just any ordinary day. Today, the world was about to see what Emily Harper and her remarkable dog were really made of. The calmness of the park didn't last long. Emily had just rounded a bend in the path when the roar of engines shattered the peaceful sounds of birds chirping and children playing. The noise grew louder, and soon, a group of bikers sped into view. Their motorcycles gleamed under the sun, and their laughter boomed across the open space like thunder. At first, Emily didn't pay them much attention. She kept walking, her cane tapping steadily on the path while Max guided her along. But Max's ears perked up, and Emily could feel his body tense. His steps became sharper, his posture alert. She knew him well enough to know something wasn't right. The bikers rolled closer, their loud engines drowning out the gentle hum of the park. There were 4 of them, all dressed in dark leather jackets and helmets with wild designs. They laughed loudly, their voices full of mischief. To most people, they might have seemed like a rowdy group of thrill-seekers out for a ride, but Max's reaction told Emily there was more to them than just noise. One of the bikers, a big man with a shaved head and a leather jacket featuring a flaming skull, spotted Emily. His bike screeched to a halt just a few feet away. "Hey, lady," he called out, his voice loud and mocking. "Where you off to in such a hurry? Got a date with a wall or something?" His words were met with howls of laughter from the others as they revved their engines and circled closer. Emily stopped walking, her grip tightening on Max's leash. The dog let out a low, deep growl, his hackles rising. Emily rested a hand on his head, her fingers firm but calm. "Easy, Max," she murmured, though her own heart was starting to race. She knew Max wouldn't act without her command, but his growl was a clear warning, these men were trouble. Another biker, a lanky man with a crooked grin, leaned forward on his handlebars. "Relax, Grandma," he sneered. "We're just having a little fun." Emily didn't flinch at the insult, but her knuckles turned white as she gripped Max's harness. She couldn't see their faces, but she could feel their presence closing in. The bikers weren't just there for fun, they wanted a reaction. They wanted to scare her, maybe even humiliate her. Their engines roared louder, filling the air with a deafening rumble. Max growled again, louder this time, and one of the bikers laughed nervously. "Whoa, easy there, lassie," he said, though he didn't sound as confident as before. The big man with the flaming skull jacket dismounted his bike, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel as he approached. "What's with the mutt?" he asked, sneering. "You think he's gonna protect you? He's just a dog." Emily straightened her back, her hands still firm on Max's leash. She could feel the tension in the air, but she didn't respond to their taunts. Instead, she focused on keeping herself calm and steady. Fear wouldn't help her now, and she trusted Max to know what to do if things got worse. "Come on, lady," the big man continued, his tone dripping with mockery. "We're just saying hi. No need to get all stiff on us. You're acting like we're gonna rob you or something." His friends laughed again, the sound harsh and mean. They revved their engines louder, circling closer until the space around Emily felt small and suffocating. Max shifted his weight, his growl turning into a sharp bark that made one of the bikers flinch. "Whoa, look at that," one of them said. "The dog thinks he's tough." The big man waved a hand dismissively. "Relax, it's just a guide dog. He's not gonna do anything." "Right, lady. Isn't that how these dogs work?" They just walk and sniff or whatever. Emily finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. You should leave us alone, she said. Her words weren't loud, but there was a quiet strength in them that made the laughter pause for a moment. The big man smirked, clearly unimpressed. Or what? You gonna sick your little dog on us? Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Max took a step forward, his body low and tense like a coiled spring. His eyes locked onto the man in front of him, and his sharp bark echoed through the park. The man stopped in his tracks, his smirk faltering. What's with this dog? He muttered, glancing back at his friends. One of them shrugged, but the nervous look in his eyes betrayed him. Maybe we should back off, man. He doesn't look like a regular guide dog. But the big man wasn't ready to back down. He took another step toward Emily and Max, his tone turning harsher. I don't know what you're trying to pull here, lady, but you're messing with the wrong guys. Emily didn't flinch. She stood still, her hand steady on Max's harness. Inside, her heart raced, but she trusted Max completely. He had been trained for moments like this. And while these men didn't know it yet, they were about to find out exactly what kind of dog Max was. The bikers continued to rev their engines, their laughter trying to mask the growing tension. But Max didn't budge. His growl rumbled low and steady, his body ready for whatever might come next. The big man finally turned back to his bike, shaking his head. This isn't worth it, he muttered, climbing back onto the seat. Let's go. His friends hesitated, glancing at Emily and Max one last time before revving their engines and following him down the path. The roar of their motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy silence. Emily let out a slow breath, her hand gently stroking Max's head. Good boy, she whispered, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Max's body relaxed slightly, but his ears stayed alert, still scanning for danger. As the park returned to its peaceful rhythm, Emily and Max continued their walk, their bond stronger than ever. What the bikers didn't know and never would was that they had come far too close to a dog trained to protect with the precision of a soldier and the loyalty of a friend. They had wanted a show, but they were lucky to leave without seeing the full performance. The bikers' laughter grew louder, echoing through the quiet park. They revved their engines and called out more insults, each one sharper and meaner than the last. Emily stood still, her grip firm on Max's harness, her mind working quickly. She wasn't scared, she had faced worse before, but she needed to keep calm and think. These men were looking for trouble, and she didn't want to give them the show they were expecting. Max didn't move. His sharp, intelligent eyes stayed locked on the leader of the group, a burly man with a flaming skull on the back of his leather jacket. The man was smirking, clearly enjoying the moment. Max's posture was steady, but his muscles were coiled like a spring, ready to act if needed. Emily could feel his tension through the leash. She trusted him completely. You should go, Emily said, her voice calm but firm. It wasn't loud, but it carried a strength that cut through the biker's jeers like a knife. The leader's smirk widened. He was clearly amused by her defiance. Or what? He asked, stepping closer. His boots crunched against the gravel as he moved. Your mutt gonna bite me? He chuckled, reaching out a hand toward Max, as if to test the dog's reaction. Before his hand got anywhere near Max, the dog shifted. It was subtle but powerful. His body straightened, his muscles tightened, and his ears stood tall. Max didn't bark or growl, he didn't need to. His presence alone was a warning. He was no ordinary dog, and anyone with half a brain could see it. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. She wasn't afraid, not with Max by her side. Max, she said softly, her voice steady, position. The command was simple, but it changed everything. In an instant, Max moved. He stepped forward, planting himself firmly between Emily and the bikers. His growl rumbled low and deep, like thunder rolling in the distance. His eyes were locked on the leader, and his entire body radiated control and power. It was as if the air around him had shifted, growing heavier with the weight of his presence. The leader froze, his smirk fading into something closer to confusion, or was it fear? "What the?" he muttered, taking a small step back. His hesitation didn't go unnoticed. One of the other bikers, a younger man with a nervous laugh, called out, "Hey, man, maybe we should back off. That dog doesn't look right." The leader turned to glare at him. "Shut up," he snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. But the flicker of unease in his eyes betrayed him. Max didn't move, but his growl grew louder, his sharp teeth just barely visible. He was a picture of restraint, dangerous but controlled. Emily placed a calming hand on his head, her fingers brushing through his fur. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice quiet but full of trust. The leader tried to laugh, though it sounded forced. "What are you, some kind of dog trainer?" he asked, his bravado cracking. "This isn't a movie, lady." Emily didn't respond to his taunt. She didn't need to. Max's presence spoke louder than words ever could. One of the other bikers leaned forward on his handlebars, his face pale. "I don't think that's just a guide dog," he said, his voice low and uncertain. The leader turned to him, clearly annoyed. "What are you talking about?" The younger biker pointed at Max, his hand shaking slightly. "Look at him. The way he moves. The way he's watching us. That's not normal. He's trained like, really trained." Emily's faint smile returned. The young biker wasn't wrong. Max wasn't just a guide dog. He had a history, one that most people would never guess just by looking at him. Before he became her loyal companion, Max had been a working dog, a canine with a career most humans couldn't match. He had served in high-security roles, protecting people in the most dangerous situations. When he retired, he was paired with Emily, and their bond had been unbreakable ever since. But she didn't need to explain any of that to the bikers. They didn't deserve to know Max's story. All they needed to know was that they were in over their heads. The leader glanced back at Emily, trying to hide his unease. "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "You think your dog's gonna scare us?" Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. "I think you're smarter than you look," she said. Her words were simple, but they hit like a hammer. The leader's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. Max barked once, sharp and commanding. The sound echoed through the park, and the bikers flinched. It wasn't a warning bark. It was a promise. The younger biker turned his bike around, his engine rumbling as he prepared to leave. "I'm out," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't worth it." The leader glared at him but didn't stop him from leaving. One by one, the other bikers followed, their laughter replaced by nervous silence. The leader was the last to go, his pride clearly wounded. He pointed a finger at Emily as he backed away. "You got lucky today," he said, his voice lacking the confidence it had before. "But don't think this is over." Emily didn't respond. She simply stood there, her hand resting on Max's head. The big man climbed onto his bike, revved the engine, and sped off after his friends. When the park was quiet again, Emily let out a slow breath. She crouched down beside Max, her hands stroking his fur. "Good boy," she said softly. "You did so well." Max relaxed, his posture softening as the tension drained away. He looked up at her with trusting eyes, his tail wagging slightly. Emily straightened and resumed her walk, Max by her side. The world around them seemed peaceful again, but Emily knew how close things had come to going wrong. She also knew Max had saved her, just like he always did. The bikers might have thought they were in charge, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a protector, a guardian, and Emily's greatest ally. And together, they were unstoppable. The air was heavy with tension as Max stood between Emily and the bikers, his body taut like a bowstring ready to snap. His growl rumbled low and deep, a sound that cut through the bikers' jeers and revving engines. The leader of the group took a hesitant step back, his earlier bravado faltering. He looked at Max, then at Emily, then back at the dog. "Look, lady," the leader said, his voice louder than it needed to be. He was trying to sound confident, but there was a nervous edge to his words. "You better call off your dog before someone gets hurt." Emily didn't flinch. Her hand rested lightly on Max's harness, her fingers steady. "Max doesn't attack without a reason," she said calmly. "But if you're smart, you'll leave now." The leader scoffed, trying to regain his swagger. "What's he gonna do? Bark us to death?" That was the last straw. Max lunged forward with a speed and precision that left no time for thought. He didn't bite. Max wasn't a wild animal. Instead, he barked sharply and charged, cutting through the bikers like a knife slicing through butter. His movements were exact, calculated, and terrifyingly effective. The bikers scattered in panic. Engines roared as they tried to start their motorcycles, but their hands fumbled, fear making them clumsy. Max didn't give them time to regroup. He barked again, sharp and commanding, driving them back. One of the bikers tripped over his own feet, landing on the ground with a thud. Another stumbled sideways, his helmet falling off as he scrambled to get away. What kind of dog is this?" one of them shouted, his voice high-pitched with fear. Max herded them like sheep, his sharp barks and swift movements leaving no room for argument. He didn't touch them, but the force of his presence was enough to send shivers down their spines. His growl was like thunder, a warning they couldn't ignore. "Stand down, Max," Emily called, her voice steady and clear. In an instant, Max obeyed. He stopped in his tracks, his growl fading into silence. He turned and trotted back to Emily, his movements calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. Sitting at her side, he looked up at her with his sharp, intelligent eyes, waiting for her next command. The bikers stood frozen, their faces pale and their eyes wide. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. The leader, who had been so full of bravado moments ago, now looked shaken. He glanced at his crew, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. "That's no ordinary dog," one of the bikers muttered, his voice barely audible. He took a step back, his hands raised as if to show he meant no harm. I think we should go." Emily turned her face toward them, her expression calm but unyielding. There was no fear in her voice when she spoke. "Max is a retired canine," she said, her tone even. "He's trained to protect. And me? I'm his mission now." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The bikers exchanged nervous glances, the weight of her statement sinking in. They weren't dealing with an ordinary guide dog. This wasn't a pet. This was a highly trained protector, a dog who had seen danger before and wouldn't hesitate to act. The leader, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger, pointed a shaky finger at Emily. "This isn't over," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "It is if you leave now." That was all it took. The bikers didn't need a second warning. Engines roared to life, and the acrid smell of burnt rubber filled the air as they sped off, their tires kicking up dust. In their hurry to leave, one of them nearly collided with a bench, swerving just in time to avoid it. Within moments, they were gone, leaving behind only the faint echo of their retreating laughter now tinged with unease. Emily stood still for a moment, listening to the silence that followed. She reached down and stroked Max's head, her fingers brushing through his soft fur. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice filled with quiet pride. Max wagged his tail once, his eyes fixed on her face. A small crowd had gathered at a distance, watching the scene unfold. Some clapped, others murmured words of admiration. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at Max. "Mom, did you see that dog? He's like a superhero." Emily turned slightly toward the sound of the boy's voice, a small smile playing on her lips. "He is," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. The park slowly returned to normal. The children went back to playing, and the joggers resumed their steady pace. But for Emily, the moment lingered. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. She didn't need to see the world around her to know it was beautiful. And with Max by her side, she felt stronger than ever. "Come on, Max," she said, giving his harness a gentle tug. "Let's finish our walk." Max rose to his feet, his posture relaxed but still alert. Together, they continued down the winding path, their steps steady and unhurried. The world might see her as vulnerable, but Emily knew the truth. She wasn't alone, and with Max by her side, she was far from defenseless. The bikers had wanted a show, and they'd gotten one. But it wasn't the kind they had bargained for. They had learned the hard way that Emily Harper and her incredible dog were not to be underestimated. As the two walked away, the sun breaking through the clouds above them, Emily felt a quiet sense of triumph. Sometimes, she thought, strength isn't about what you can see. It's about what you know is there, standing by your side, ready to protect you when it matters most. The park slowly returned to its usual calm after the loud bikers sped away. The rumble of their motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving behind a peaceful stillness. For a moment, Emily stood quietly, her hand resting gently on Max's head. The loyal dog sat by her side, his body relaxed but still alert, his sharp eyes scanning the park one last time. Then, like a wave, the quiet gave way to the sound of clapping. A small crowd had gathered nearby, drawn by the commotion. Their applause broke through the stillness, and voices murmured in admiration. "That was incredible," someone said. "I've never seen a dog like that before," another added. Emily turned slightly in their direction and gave a polite nod, a soft smile on her lips. She didn't need their applause or kind words to feel validated. She and Max had faced far worse in their lives. Still, it was nice to know that people had witnessed what true teamwork looked like. Justice had been served, and the bullies had left with their pride bruised and their egos deflated. That, for Emily, was more than enough. She bent down and stroked Max's head, her voice low and full of affection. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. "You were perfect, as always." Max wagged his tail lightly, his eyes lifting to meet hers. His posture softened, and the tension in his muscles melted away. He seemed to understand her praise, his loyalty and love for Emily shining in his gaze. As the applause began to fade, a young boy, no older than 10, stepped forward hesitantly. He held his mother's hand but looked at Max with wide, admiring eyes. "Excuse me," he said, his voice small but curious. Emily turned her head toward him, her smile growing a little warmer. "Yes," she replied. The boy let go of his mother's hand and stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Max. "Your dog is amazing," he said, his words tumbling out quickly. "Is he a superhero?" Emily chuckled softly. "He's not a superhero," she said. "But he's very special. Max is a retired canine. He was trained to protect people and keep them safe. Now, he takes care of me." The boy's eyes grew even wider. "He used to be a police dog." "Something like that," Emily replied. She leaned down slightly, her hand still resting on Max's head. "He's calm most of the time, but don't let that fool you. Max doesn't like bullies." The boy nodded solemnly, as if taking her words to heart. "He's the coolest dog I've ever seen," he said earnestly. Emily's smile deepened. "He's my best friend," she said simply. The boy's mother gently touched his shoulder, signaling it was time to go. "Thank you for sharing that," she said to Emily. "Your dog is remarkable." As the boy and his mother walked away, Emily straightened and gave Max's leash a light tug. "Come on, Max," she said. "Let's keep moving." Max rose to his feet, his steps steady and confident as they continued along the path. Their bond was unbreakable, built on trust, loyalty, and years of shared experiences. As they walked, Emily thought about what had just happened. The bikers had wanted to intimidate her, to make her feel small and powerless. But instead, they had been the ones to back down, chased off by the strength and precision of a dog they had underestimated. It was a reminder of the power of quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout or boast but speaks volumes through action.